Committee meets this morning to receive testimony on the posture of the United States Army and the fiscal year 2018 defense budget request. I'm pleased to welcome Robert Speer, Acting Secretary of the Army, and General Mark Milley, Chief of Staff of the Army. This committee is grateful for both of you and your many years of distinguished service and your continued leadership of our Army. 16 years of war have tested the Army, perhaps more than any other service, but time and again our soldiers have met the test and proved their commitment, courage, and determination. It's the duty of this committee and this Congress to do their utmost to provide them with the support they need and deserve. That starts by recognizing that our Army is still at war. At this moment, 186,000 soldiers are deployed in 140 locations around the globe. They're fighting terrorists and training our partners in Afghanistan, supporting the fight against ISIS in Iraq and Syria, all the while reinforcing the defenses of our allies from the Korean DMZ to NATO's eastern flank. The burden imposed on our soldiers only grows as threats to our nation increase and sequestration remains the law of the land. Given current operational demands, restoring readiness must be the Army's first priority. But the sad reality is that the focus on readiness issues in recent years has made little to no difference. For yet another year, just over 1/3 of the Army's brigade combat teams are ready for deployment and decisive operations. Just 3 of the Army's 58 brigade combat teams are at the highest level of readiness, and the Army still does not plan to return to full-spectrum readiness until 2021 at the earliest. The President's budget request is supposed to be focused on restoring readiness. The buildup, the administration says, will have to wait a couple of years. That ignores what Army leaders have testified to this committee, which is that inadequate end strength is forcing the Army to consume readiness as fast as it produces it. In other words, the Army will never truly restore readiness until it begins to grow. Yet the President has submitted a fiscal year 2018 budget request that calls for 0 additional soldiers. Meanwhile, the Army is woefully behind on modernization, and our soldiers are increasingly unprepared to confront the harsh realities of 21st century warfare. Analyses by the National Commission on the Future of the United States Army, the Office of the Secretary of Defense, and the Army itself have pointed to glaring capability gaps in mobility, lethality, and survivability. These problems will only get worse as adversaries such as Russia continue to modernize their forces. Put simply, our Army lacks both the adequate capacity and the key capabilities to win decisively. We cannot move quickly enough to modernize our Army and give our soldiers the advanced capabilities they need to prevail against a determined peer adversary. Yet today, the Army has still not decided upon a comprehensive Army modernization plan for the future. Indeed, despite the great potential of advanced technologies, from active protective systems to reactive armor to lethal munitions, the Army does not have a major armored fighting vehicle under design for the first time in nearly a century. It's little wonder our current National Security Advisor, General McMaster, remarked a year ago that the Army is, and I quote, outranged and outgunned by many potential adversaries. The Army's modernization woes are undoubtedly connected to the service's disastrous acquisition record over the last 2 decades. Too many underperforming or canceled programs, too few real capabilities fielded, and far too much taxpayer money wasted. Tens of billions of dollars were squandered on programs like the Future Combat System, the Comanche attack helicopter, the Crusader howitzer, the Joint Tactical Radio System, and the Distributed Common Ground System Army. Most recently, the committee has learned of the failure of the Warfighter Information Network Tactical, or WIN-T. This program, I urge my colleagues, if they don't pay any attention to anything I say today, this program has cost the taxpayer over $6 billion and is yet to meet the requirements of our warfighters. $6 billion. But even with all that said, it's also true that the Army will never recover from this troubled acquisition history if it's paralyzed by fear of repeating it. This committee has acted in the last 2 defense authorization bills to empower the leaders of military services in the acquisition process. I urge our witnesses to use these new authorities to drive bold change. Building a modern Army that can win decisively in the harsh environs of 21st century warfare will require visionary leadership. You will have to learn the lessons of the past, make tough decisions, take and manage real risks, and hold yourselves and those under your command accountable for results. When you do so, you will always have an ally in this committee, because I believe our soldiers cannot afford the false choice between readiness and modernization. We can and must do better.